Hello, this is Real World Audio, and I'm going to show you the difference between ALNICO magnet, ferrite magnet, and neodymium magnet loudspeaker drivers, because I think many has been wondering what's the difference between them, and there's something pretty crazy things going on. Is the difference between these three topologies is not just the material of the magnet that they use in the loudspeaker driver, but it's also the way the magnet is used is completely different between ALNICO and ferrite and neodymium. So for some strange reason, I don't know what's the cause of that, but the magnetic circuits are very different in each of the three cases that we see, and I think that is that accounts for a bigger part in the difference of the sound that these different magnet drivers make in the sound that we can observe. So when you just think of these, do not think that it's just the magnet that's different, but it's also how the motor generates those the magnetic circuit is vastly different for each of these three cases. So I'm going to go through what is happening in each of those cases, and I'd like to emphasize this because what I have seen, I have looked at the data for hundreds of loudspeaker drivers, ALNICO, ferrite, and neodymium, and I have noticed something really crazy that no one seems to face publicly, a very uncomfortable fact. And that very uncomfortable fact that even though when we go from a progression from ALNICO to ferrite and neodymium magnets, the strength of the magnets used increases. So neodymium is stronger than ferrite, and ferrite magnets are stronger than ALNICO magnets. Yet, we do observe that as we go higher in the progression of using stronger magnets, the loudspeaker drivers are poorer and poorer in efficiency. And this does not compute, because if you have a stronger magnet, you should get higher efficiency because you have greater strength. So why are we seeing the exact opposite? And I think the reason for getting poorer and poorer efficiencies from stronger and stronger magnets, part of the reason is the motor structure. So in the case of the ALNICO magnets, the magnetic circuit is near perfect. In the case of the ferrite drivers, the magnetic circuit is very compromised, and in neodymium is the most compromised of the three. So now let's take a deeper look into the subject. So to make an ALNICO driver, or the most primitive loudspeaker driver you can imagine, you need a magnet. So this is like a circular magnet, and basically that magnet produces magnetic lines, south pole, north pole, and as you see, the magnetic lines are inside the magnet and they go out and then circle back. And now what we can do is put the former and the voice coil around it, put it around the magnet, and when we apply electricity through the voice coil, then the changing magnetic field in the voice coil will interact with the magnetic lines generated by the bar magnet, and it will slide up and down, and as the cone is also connected to this moving former, the cone will move up and down and generate sound. So that's the basis of the whole thing. But if you do this, so you get a magnet and you put your former and cone around it, and you make a suspension for it to make sure that it can move back and forth smoothly, then you are going to waste a lot of the magnetic energy. So these magnetic lines that are traveling back will be wasted and they will be radiated into the surroundings. Now, to prevent that from happening, you can add a magnetizable material around the magnet, and thus you can close the magnetic circuit. So basically the magnetic lines that spread out, can we see? No. They spread out here and go back, they go through this magnetic structure. And when you look at an ALNICO magnet, ALNICO loudspeaker driver, this is how they are made. You see? So that's the center. The ALNICO magnet is here, hidden in the middle, right there. And then we have this iron loop around it, which closes the magnetic circuit. So what we have here is a near perfect magnetic circuit. And the voice coil is in close proximity to the generator itself, where the magnetic lines originate. So basically, when you study magnetism, the magnetic lines are near perfect and very dense at the site where they are generated, which is inside the magnet. And the further away you go from the magnet, the more they become distorted, misaligned, and sensitive to disruptions. So what does that mean? So it means that the magnetic lines in your magnet, these are perfectly oriented. Your magnet has basically its set magnetism, so all of the magnetized particles are set there and they don't want to switch their polarity, so they generate the magnetic lines. So when we go back here, all of those particles there are hard set, and when these magnetic lines out there, these are much more fragile, much more sensitive. So basically, if you have another magnet or electromagnetic interference in the vicinity, then the body of your magnet is totally resisting that EMI, unless it is of very high level. But in that case, you have much more to worry about. It's not happening in real life. In a normal scenario, when we use our loudspeakers, all of the EMI and all of the magnetic interferences are so weak that they have absolutely zero impact on the permanent magnet. However, they have substantial impact on these magnetic lines which are away from the permanent body. So now, when we add that magnetizable material, that material can be magnetized, and that's why the magnetic grains, the magnetic particles, I mean the metal inside, will orient itself according to the magnetic lines generated by the magnet, but they will be also susceptible to those other interferences which will change its magnetism. So that's why it's really critical and very important that for ALNICO magnet loudspeaker drivers, the voice coil is right next to, it's the closest to the body of the magnet, which has this hard magnetism, and it's completely resisting any attempts from the surroundings to change its magnetic state. And now, basically, that was how an ALNICO magnet works. It's basically, or I would say an ALNICO loudspeaker driver works. They are near perfect magnetic circuits. So now when we look at ferrite drivers, in these cases the magnet is not in the center. We have a pole piece in the center, so the magnetizable material and the magnet switches places. So in the case of the ferrite magnet, ferrite driver, ferrite motor, the centerpiece is not a magnet. It is just an iron core. It's a magnetizable core. and the surrounding it, we still have an iron magnetizable circuit to close the magnetic circuit, and there is a ferrite toroid around this whole assembly. Let me just show you in the case of a tweeter. This is how all the ferrite drivers work. So here, this black thing there, if you can see it, this is the magnet, and it runs around the driver assembly. And now you see this iron thing. This is the bottom of the magnetic circuit, and it runs up. So it runs up under this toroid, and then close to the voice coil, it closes the gap. So what we are seeing here, that the entire magnetic circuit for a ferrite driver is made of soft iron. And of course, the strongest thing around it is that ferrite ring. So it means that that will be the strongest magnetic element that acts on this circuit. However, we have still problems with that, is that it just surrounds it in this dimension. So when we look it from the sides, there it's completely shielded by the magnet. But when you look from the bottom, from this angle, it's susceptible to other magnetic elements. So if you have a EMI, magnetic interference, then it will change the magnetism, the magnetized status of that closed loop. So that's why ferrite drivers are more susceptible to interferences. And we have a problem. Do I see it here? No, I don't see it on my slides. However, that big problem is that as you see, the magnets generate a field, and the field goes around the magnet. So what we have here is that in the case of a ferrite magnet, we are using only the inside, only one side of the ferrite magnet to propagate the magnetic lines into the motor. What about the outside? So half of the magnet is not protected, it's exposed, so half of these magnetic lines are just radiating outside. So this is why there were like the TV sets in the 60s and 70s. They all used ALNICO magnet loudspeakers in the TV sets, because they do not radiate magnetism. Because if you radiate magnetism out, then the cathode ray tubes in your television set, they were negatively affected by the magnetism that's escaping your drivers. And in the case of the ALNICOs, both sides of the magnetic circuit, so everything is closed and there's no escaping magnetism. So you can place them close to an element that is sensitive to magnetism, because it has a near perfect magnetic circuit, which means that an ALNICO motor is harnessing all of the, or nearly all of the magnetic energy that is generated by the magnet. And on the other hand, a ferrite driver is wasting a lot of the magnetic potential. So maybe the ferrite magnet is 30% stronger than an ALNICO magnet, but it's wasting 50% of its potential magnetism that's carried by the magnet. So the net result is that you are getting a weaker motor structure if you use the ferrite magnet in this fashion, even though it would be theoretically stronger, but the way the magnetic circuit is produced for the ferrite driver, it still ends up with a vast compromises on many fashion. So there we go. I think I just covered these things. And now let's go into the neodymium driver. So the neodymium driver is the worst of the three. it continues where the ferrite driver started to go, and it takes it to the next level. So this is what I was talking, just circling back to the ferrite driver. So imagine this is the toroid, this is the ring magnet, ring ferrite magnet around your driver. So it looks like this. So this is the ferrite magnet, and the inside, you see, all the magnetic lines are collected, are stored inside your driver, so that will make the strong magnetic field against which your voice coil can move back and forth. However, the outside, those magnetic lines which fall on this side, they are all exposed, and they are radiated out. And actually I drew this the wrong way, because the magnetic lines are more compressed on the inside, and these big loops, they go out on the outside. So on the outside you have these loops extending out far. And let's just go for a neodymium driver. I do not have any neodymium drivers, so that's why I'm using a cube audio demonstration. So you see there is that soft iron pole piece, same structure as a ferrite magnet, and here, instead of having a toroid ferrite, we have dozens of neodymium magnets, and it basically acts very, very similar to a ferrite magnet, with the difference that in a ferrite magnet you have a uniform magnetic lines forming around a uniform band of magnets, band of a single magnet. But here, in the case of the neodymium, you have dozens and dozens of magnetic generators, each generating their own magnetic lines, and they try to create these nice magnetic loops, and they have to basically distort their magnetic lines, because each of these magnets are just pushing its neighbor. And this magnet, which are on the inside ring, have a very different magnetic effect on your voice coil compared to those magnets which are on the outside of this ring. So that's why this is, from a magnetic circuit standpoint, is a much more unbalanced circuit than either the ferrite or the ALNICO circuit. And basically I took this because I've been asked a long time ago, one of you, or I think many of you, have mentioned the cube audio drivers, and I looked at them in detail, and they are really fascinating drivers, and I made a very interesting series about it. I have not made the videos yet, but I made some slides for it already, and by studying the drivers I made some very interesting discoveries in comparing them, and for that, to understand those, it is really important that you see what is the difference between a neodymium driver, a ferrite driver, and also an ALNICO driver, and this will help to a great degree to understand why they measure and perform the way they perform. So basically, just recapping things, so if you have an ALNICO driver, this is another example, then basically you have the magnet in the center, and you have the magnetic circuit closed, so you are closing the loop, and the voice coil riding next to the very powerful, very solid generator, and I think this is the most perfect magnetic circuit we have used so far for loudspeaker drivers, and this helps to explain why the tonality of the ALNICO drivers is the best, the most natural we have so far, and how come the ferrite drivers and neodymium drivers why they sound harsh or uncontrolled or clinical or unnatural in comparison to ALNICO drivers. So thank you guys for tuning in. I hope this helped everyone to understand these different drivers better. Please like, subscribe, tell your friends. Bye bye.